Hey everyone, Ian King here with the weekly Winning Investor Daily YouTube video. And before we get started with this week's discussion, I want to please ask you, if you like our content, go ahead and smash that like button. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't. Tell your friends, tell your family, and also feel free to leave a comment at the end. Last week we asked you if you had ordered the Tesla truck, the Tesla Cybertruck, because my colleague Steve and I have significant others that aren't letting us order a Tesla Cybertruck, and one of you actually mentioned that you did. So shout out to Eduardo, who said that they ordered the Tesla Cybertruck. So Steve, some big news this week, huh?
Right. Saw that Apple is putting a little bit more clarity into their Apple Car plans. So that was pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, we heard rumors of this earlier this year, and I think that, Apple can't manufacture its own car, so that was good for Magna International back then as a rumor of partnership with Magna. But the news is not Apple doing electric car. They're thinking about doing an autonomous vehicle by 2025. I mean, what do you think of this?
I think it makes sense from a business standpoint because EVs are relatively new technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if Apple were to release an EV, they'd be a little bit late. It's also kind of, by the time that they would get an EV out potentially, it's not really next generation. Like I know me and you and I subscribe to the idea that EVs are the future and they are the next generation of vehicles. But I think Apple wants to be on that, pinnacle of the next stage of innovation.
Right. And I mean, I think we both agree that EVs are kind of a commodity. At some point, like all the batteries are going to be the same. There's not going to be one clear leader. I mean, you already see, if you look at the specs on the Lucid Air, it actually outperforms the Tesla Model S at a similar price point. So it's not like Tesla is always going to be the most dominant EV car maker. And I really believe, the big battle here is for autonomy. And we see two or three companies really in the lead. We've got Tesla, obviously, which has, an undisclosed amount of real world mileage. Some people think it can be in the billions because they don't report those numbers. You've got Waymo, which now has 10 billion miles in simulation, 20 million miles on actual roads with their autonomous vehicles. And then you also have, I would throw GM in this because they've got a 70% stake in Cruise. Now you've got Apple in the equation. I mean, do you think, given Apple's superiority, I would call it, with mobile devices, laptops, watches, and wearables, I mean, do you think they could catch Tesla and Google in this race?
I don't think so. I think that Apple, I'm sure that they'll develop a car
Mm-hmm.
in 2025, which is the time frame that they put on kind of hopefully getting this out. Seems reasonable compared to other competitors, which are kind of saying the same thing. I think more with Apple's car, they'll probably find a way to make it really mesh with their current technology, like the Apple Watch or the phone. It's hard for me to imagine exactly how they'll do that because we already have like all these Bluetooth integrations and things like that. But they've been really good at that in the past. So I think that that might be an enticing, an enticing way to get people to buy it.
Yeah.
But I just think that at this point in the game, and I know that they have been training their self-driving capability, I just see Tesla and maybe GM Cruise as really the leaders here moving forward.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy an Apple car just because it's gonna be easier for integrate my Bluetooth. Whenever I sit in the car, I always have to fiddle with it because it doesn't connect correctly. So, one thing though that they said is they want to create a car that doesn't have a steering wheel, doesn't have brakes. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm a pretty bad backseat driver, so I'm not so sure that in 5 years I'm gonna be comfortable sitting in a car that doesn't give me the capability to take control when I think the car is out of control. How do you feel about that? Are you a little bit more of a risk taker yourself?
Well, I did see like a TV show where they had a self-driving car get hacked, and that was like the first scene. So that was a little
Oh,
scary.
geez, yeah.
Um, but I think that it's reasonable. I mean, we already see videos for you can see footage on YouTube, for example, of these cars driving themselves. A lot of the time, and it's even getting to be more like full drives. Like I've seen people pull out of a driveway, go somewhere, and
Right.
come all the way back, make like dangerous left turns where they can't even see behind the opposing vehicle. So the technology is really sophisticated. I'd be comfortable if if the technology is available to use on a mass scale, I'm sure that it's safe to use.
Mm-hmm. And I think, if there's one company that can solve this problem, I would put Apple in the lead. I mean, they've got $200 billion in cash on their balance sheets. I mean, they already have developed the best chips for laptops with the M1, and they say that they've got a processor that's already better, in artificial intelligence for autonomous vehicles that's better than what Tesla has. So, I think that what's really interesting about this is I think the autonomous vehicle race really starts to heat up with this announcement. Another thing too that I'd like to say is that the fear of sitting in a self-driving car is probably something we're all just going to get over with at some point. I mean, I remember when the first time I drove a Tesla that had the partial level 2 autonomy, and you press the button and you're on the highway and the thing is kind of staying in the lanes and accelerating and decelerating with traffic. And for probably the first 15 minutes, it was a little sketchy. And then, I was on a 2-hour road trip. By the end of the road trip, I was like not even paying attention to the road, which is a really bad thing because, the car, you start to just feel like the car's got it for you. And I just want to talk about one other historical significance. There, when they first invented the autonomous elevator, which is basically the elevator that gets you to your floor and not having to have an operator in there, people were totally freaked out by that. Like getting in an elevator, going 50 flights up in a skyscraper without somebody who's actually controlling the lever was just like a totally obscene thing for a few years. And then what happened was in New York City, the elevator workers went on strike and people were forced, and businesses were also forced to make them autonomous to help people get to their offices. And so we overcame that. I think that we're going to overcome our fears of sitting in an autonomous car, even though maybe it take a little bit longer. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think that's a human tendency to be fearful of the unknown.
Yeah,
Um,
so we've also talked. I just want to mention another thing. We've also discussed this idea of creating an autonomous fleet and what's that going to look like. I think the first company that gets an AV out to market is going to have incredible, economy of scale. They're going to be able to supply more cars to the market. I mean, the limitation is probably going to be how much they can manufacture in 1 year. So maybe every other car manufacturer catches up to it, and then you need some type of platform aggregator like Uber, that can find you your self-driving car instead of having like a specific app for Tesla self-driving taxis, an app for GM self-driving taxis, or Apple. What do you think about that?
I think maybe initially, what my theory is that all of these technologies use the same algorithms. They use the same engineers that go from one shop to the other,
Mm-hmm.
based on compensation, or so they can build something, that's more of in its infancy. So I think initially, maybe for the first 2 years or so, whoever really gets there first could be Apple. And it may be Apple, considering they can put all the resources into self-driving versus other companies where they're kind of stretching out between either fully, Tesla, which is fully electric, or, say these traditional automakers that are doing everything. So I do think if they can integrate that into a fleet, maybe like a robo taxi fleet, um, they'll be successful in doing so, and they can scale that. But I think that over time, it's going to be commoditized. Not in 2025, maybe 2030. We'll see. By then, it's logical that the same thing will happen with AVs as well, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
And also I think that we need to see whether or not these businesses that are creating these self-driving vehicles are actually going to make them commercially available, because they might want to just produce them themselves and then earn revenue from driving people around rather than, selling the vehicle for, let's say, $100,000 and then letting, someone use it part-time as their daily driver and then also put it into the network. So I think that that's going to be, it might actually be like a government regulatory issue as well, because you don't want to give one company a monopoly on all of self-driving. So I mean, really exciting times we're living in right now. And also, by the way, Steve, you have an iPhone, right?
I do. I have an Apple Watch too.
Oh, okay, good. So you're not just like an Apple hater, even though like
Nah,
you're not a big fan of the car.
no. I think that I think they'll be successful. I just I think that if something goes wrong with this, it's not going to change their business at all, right?
Mhm.
So their life doesn't depend on the Apple Car, as opposed to other companies where their life depends on churning out a car.
My life depends on whether or not I can sync my Bluetooth phone to my car, though. So we are, I'm really looking forward to the Apple Car, even though I'm not crazy about not having a steering wheel. So that's it for this week's YouTube video. I want to thank Steve for joining me. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Any questions, leave a comment. Love to hear from you. Will you sit in the back of a self-driving car, or will you sit in the front seat of a car that doesn't have a steering wheel, a pedal, or brakes? We'd love to hear from you in the comments. I'm Ian King. He's Steve Fernandez. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks again.